I lost everything before I found my purpose, but what's wild is I wasn't actually lost. I was just trying to build something solid on a foundation I haven't even poured yet. And maybe that's where you are right now too. Have you ever had the moment when you looked at your life, everything you've been doing, everything you've been struggling through, and realized the only person who can actually change it is you? When I joined the military at 22, it wasn't because I was brave. It was because I was broken. And deep down, I knew I needed structure. The kind of structure I clearly wasn't giving myself. See, at the time, I had already been in college for almost 3 years. But honestly, I was just existing. I was wasting time doing all the wrong things. I was still a freshman by credit hours while everyone around me was getting ready to graduate. The worst part, school was paid for. I had access to VA benefits under my grandfather's GI Bill, but none of that mattered because I had no discipline. I was just coasting. Eventually, I moved back home to figure it out, and that's when I started an electrician apprenticeship. I landed a solid job working at the VA hospital in New Orleans, but again, same problem. I couldn't get myself out of bed to go to work. That same lack of discipline that showed up in school was now showing up in my work. And one morning, instead of going to the job site, I walked straight into a recruiter's office. Before I did that though, I had one important conversation with my grandfather, a Vietnam vet, a man basically raised me with military precision. Major Payne. I sat in his office and asked him what he thought about me going to the military. And he didn't hesitate. He gave me the full blueprint, what to expect, how to move, how it would shape me. But then he looked at me dead in the face and said, "You've already been trained for this." And he wasn't lying. From the time I was young, I was waking up at 5 a.m. by him banging on the door saying, "Dad, sure. It's 5 o'clock. Time to get up. I got some errands to run." The man basically prepared me for war. Why he waking me up at 5 a.m.? But honestly, he didn't just prepare me physically, he prepared my mind. Even when we played sports, I was running drills in the backyard, in the front yard, like I was training for the major leagues. It all worked out. He still had me doing that. Not gonna lie, he didn't just prepare me physically, he prepared my mind. I just didn't realize it until later. So I made the decision quietly. I passed the ASVAB, I sworn in, and I did it all before I told anyone in my family because I didn't want anyone to talk me out of it. I needed this move to be mine, and that's when everything started to shift. One of the biggest lessons I took from the military, the one that's still with me today, is the concept of resiliency. We trained on it constantly. The technical definition is the ability to bounce back from adversity. But to me, resiliency always felt like faith. That same grit and belief you hold on to when everything around you is falling apart. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen." And I promise you, faith was not optional for me. Not when I was deployed overseas in South Korea, not when my family was hurting back home, and definitely not when I was trying to build something solid out of nothing but lessons, heartbreak, and hustle. Before I deployed, my grandmother, the woman who raised me, looked me in my eyes and said something that hit me deep. She said, "My mom might not be here when you get back." She said it so calmly, like she already knew. My mom didn't like she said that, but I get it now. She wasn't speaking out of fear. She was speaking from a position that she had with God, from a conversation that she knew where she was going. I was stationed in South Korea for the entire year, and while I was gone, my grandmother's health declined. I didn't know the full extent, but I could feel something wasn't right. When I got back to Texas, I was in Killeen going through post-deployment processing. Getting shots, paperwork, reintegration, all kind of stuff. I was finally one day away from going home to see my grandmother, and that's the day she passed. I never got to say goodbye. Psalms 34:18 says, "If your heart is broken, you'll find God right there. If you're kicked in the gut, he'll help you catch your breath." That scripture, that's exactly how I felt. Like I had been kicked in the gut. I cried, I screamed, I hated, I shut down emotionally for a long time. But one thing I've learned is when you don't know what to feel, you just get to work. So that's what I did. I became a machine. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And in that dark season, I learned what real resiliency, real faith actually looks like. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. It's just consistent. Hebrews 11:1 also says, in the Message Bible, "The fundamental fact of existence is that this trust in God, this faith is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living." That kind of faith carried me, especially when nothing else made sense. Listen, if you're watching this and you're in a moment of loss, of transition, of confusion, or burnout, I want you to know this isn't just my story. This is yours too. I'm just a woman who had to figure it out the hard way, but God didn't waste any of it. A year after losing my grandmother, I found myself transitioning out of the military. I would have stayed, honestly, but I wanted to change jobs within the service, and it wasn't as simple as just raising my hand. So I started planning my exit. What most people don't talk about is how hard it is to come home after you've been changed. How to walk back into normal when nothing about you is the same. But God being God, He was already 10 steps ahead of me. I got accepted into a DoD apprenticeship, Department of Defense, working in the IT department for a military police station. Now, let me tell you, that opportunity was a blessing because deep down, I've always loved tech since I was a kid and I wanted to know how things work. I wanted to fix problems. That job reminded me who I was. More importantly, it showed me that systems were already in my DNA. Psalms 139:14 says, "Body and soul I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation." God doesn't make mistakes. Even in my confusion, He was pulling the thread of my purpose. Looking back, that season was God setting me up, not for a job, but for an assignment. He wasn't just giving me a paycheck. He was planting the seed for what would later become DNAI Solutions. But the journey from idea to assignment wasn't instant. After my DoD contract ended, I moved to Houston, enrolled in school again. I was determined to do the right thing this time. I even got a job at the VA office on campus. Things were looking good, but the past showed up again. Turns out, because of the debt I racked up during my earlier college years, I couldn't keep going. Even though I was passing my classes, I was blocked from registering until I paid it all off. So, once again, school was over. And that's when I started working for a company named Vivid. A guy named Braden came to install a security system in my apartment. We got to talking, one thing led to another, and he offered me a job. Just like that. So I ended up going to Dallas with him to train. I started learning how to install systems, and for once, I didn't feel like I was trying to figure it out. I just fit. It was hands-on, problem-solving, freedom, a spark. I started thinking, maybe this is it. But just as things were stabilizing, the weight of everything I hadn't dealt with started pressing in. I moved back home for two reasons. One, to save money, and two, let's just say some relationships weren't built to go where I was headed. And that's when I started trying to figure it out again. Only this time, I thought I had the answer. Entrepreneurship. I got into credit repair. It made sense at the time. My own credit was trash. So I figured, if I can fix mine, I can help others too. I believed in it. I saw the need. I thought I had finally found my lane. And in many ways, I had. But I was still missing the lesson. I undercharged. I over-delivered. I had no systems, no boundaries, no real processes. I charged $300 for a full profile cleanup while the market standard was triple, even quadruple that. And I wasn't even collecting payment properly. Clients would drop off, stop paying, ignore the contract, and I let it slide. I didn't enforce anything. I didn't have any automation. I was tracking stuff on spreadsheets and faith. It didn't work. I burnt out bad, real bad. I was drowning. I couldn't keep up. I felt like I failed everybody, especially myself. Proverbs 15:16 says, "A simple life in the fear of God is better than a rich life with a ton of headaches." I didn't have a simple life. I had a scattered one. So I stepped away from it all, and I asked God to show me what I was really called to do. That's when everything started to shift. I came across a guy named Umar. I bought one of his mentorship programs, and little did I know, he would become a brother to me. He took me under his wing, brought me onto his team, and flew me to his events, introduced me to a whole new world that I would have never been exposed to on my own, and that's when I found it, government contracting. It all made sense. I had a military background, I had DoD experience, I had veteran-owned certifications that set me apart. I just didn't know it yet. Galatians 6:4 says, "Make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you've been given, and then sink yourself into that." That's what I did. I paid for mentorship again. I studied the game. I learned how to read RFPs. I worked the numbers. I built proposals from scratch. And then it happened. I won my first contract. It was marketing materials for a Head Start program in the city. It was umbrellas, t-shirts, koozies. But to me, that contract was gold because it was mine. Zechariah 4:10 says, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." That contract taught me two things. One, that I could win, and two, that I needed to do this smarter. Not just hustle, not just grinding, but with structure, with systems, with alignment. That's what led me to where I am now. So many small businesses don't fail because they're not talented. They fail because they're trying to scale chaos. They're building something beautiful on a broken back end. You don't just need leads. You need a way to handle the leads you already have. You don't need another tool. You need a system. And that's why I built DNAI Solutions for it, to be the system I wish I had years ago. Now, after that first contract, I was hungry, not just for money, but for mastery. I wanted to do meaningful work. I wanted to be in rooms that stretched me, not ones that drained me. That's when Chris came into the picture. At first, he was just a video guy for the mentorship team I was on with Umar. He worked with Umar, handled a lot of the visuals for our travel and content. We barely spoke at first, but God has a way of connecting people when it's time. Eventually, we got close. To this day, I honestly can't remember the exact moment when the relationship shifted, but it did. We clicked. He had a vision, he had talent, and most of all, he had heart for impact just like me. I like to say it like this: Chris brought the camera and I brought the copy. He focused on visuals while I focused on systems. Together, we started building something that wasn't just a business, it was a blueprint. 2 Timothy 1:7, God doesn't want us to be shy with his gifts, but be bold and loving and sensible. We weren't just bold about our gifts, we were committed to using them wisely. We built a boutique marketing agency that helped businesses big and small show up online in a way that drove revenue and built trust. We work with government agencies, nonprofits, city contracts, even some major organizations. But if I'm being honest, we were still winging it. Every project was a new beginning. Every client required us to reinvent the wheel. We were working around the clock, hustling with no real structure. It was rewarding, but it wasn't scalable until Chick-fil-A. Now let me be clear. We didn't get the national Chick-fil-A account now, but we did land a contract with an operator who owned 2 Chick-fil-A's before, and who had been in their system since I think she was 16. And that experience changed everything. We got invited into their internal trainings, their planning sessions, their corporate tours. And that's when we saw what real structure looked like. It wasn't just about food or customer service. It was about the system behind the service. Everything from how they onboarded their employees to how they placed their orders, tracked inventory, scheduled shifts, and maintained quality was documented, practiced, and repeated. There was a process for everything. Not only that, they even built their own software, machines, and operational tools to ensure every location stayed consistent. They didn't just have a brand, they had a whole playbook. And suddenly, all the dots connected in my life. It reminded me of the military. Every action had a protocol. Every mission had a checklist. Every team had a system. And I realized most small businesses, as well as me, don't fail because they're not smart or skilled. They fail because they don't have systems. That was the light bulb moment. That was the beginning of DNAI Solutions. Matthew 7:24-25 says, "These words I speak to you are not incidental additions in your life, homeowner improvements to your standard of living. They are foundational words, words to build a life on. If you work these words into your life, you are like a smart carpenter who built his house on a solid rock." And that's what I set out to build, not just another agency, but a system that's built on a rock, something resilient, scalable, and faith-fueled. Needless to say, we got to work. We stripped down our business, rewrote all of our SOPs, or whatever we had, fired what didn't fit, automated what we could, replaced guesswork with data, and little by little our business started running smoother. And then I asked the bigger question: how can we give this to others? Because we weren't the only ones struggling. I've seen so many business owners, especially in service industries, drowning. And not because they didn't have customers, but because they didn't have the capacity to serve the ones they already had. They were booking appointments in DMs, following up manually, missing leads, forgetting to send invoices, managing their business out of their head or notebook. That's not freedom, that's survival. You're working another 9 to 5 just with your name on it. That's why I created DNAI Solutions, not because I want another business, but because I wanted to build a kind of structure I desperately needed years ago and still optimizing to this day. This company wasn't born from strategy or opportunity. It was born from pain, from the pressure of trying to do everything myself and Chris doing everything himself, and from the realization that hustle is not a business model. We don't sell tools, we build real living infrastructure for for service-based businesses. Systems that support you when your capacity runs out. This isn't just about plugging in a CRM, it's about creating an engine behind your operations. Something that allows you to move with clarity, with consistency, and with confidence. Because the reality is, a good product or service will get you noticed, but systems will keep your business alive. I've seen firsthand what happens when you don't have that support. You end up answering DMs at midnight. You're trying to remember who paid, who didn't, who signed, who ghosted. You're chasing leads while trying to fulfill, and at the end of the week, you don't even feel like a CEO. You feel like a firefighter. But here's what I need you to understand. It's not that you're not capable. It's that you were never meant to do all of this alone. God doesn't want us to be shy with his gifts, but bold and loving and sensible. 2 Timothy 1:7. You were given a gift, a business, a vision, something that could truly change your family's future and the person you're helping. But without the proper foundation, even the best ideas fall apart. So I want to invite you, not into a sales pitch, but into a moment of alignment. A moment where you can pause and ask, what kind of support do I actually need right now? Where are the cracks in my system? And what could I change if I stopped trying to fix everything myself? That's why we created an automation audit. It's quick, it's free, and it gives you an honest snapshot of where your systems are falling short and what it will look like to fix them. This is your chance to stop surviving and start building something sustainable. Write this. Write what you see. Write it out in big block letters so it can be read on the run. If you're not ready for that yet, that's okay. You can still stick around, follow me, watch how we move, learn from our mistakes and our wins, because I'm not here to pretend I have it all figured out, because baby, I don't. But I am here to show you what it looks like when you build with intention, with faith, and with systems that actually support your life. So whether you're just getting started, stuck in the middle, or scaling faster than you can imagine, I hope this story reminded you of something. You're not alone, and there's a better way to build. Not the hard way, but the right way. This isn't just my story, it's yours too. So let's build something real together. Thank you so much for listening to me rant. If you like what you heard, please subscribe. We'll be dropping more content. If you're interested in an audit, click the link below as well to start that process. And I will see you on the next video.